and welcome. Today we are going to talk about the first step you can take to prepare your students for the state tests. If you missed my last video, I did an introduction to the Test Prep Toolkit, a resource I created to help teachers prepare their students for the state tests. So make sure you go back and watch that video, or you can also download the Test Prep Toolkit down below this video by clicking the link, and it will take you to all of the resources that I've put together. The first thing you're going to want to do is download the roadmap. This is going to walk you through the 10 steps you can take to prepare your students for the state tests. And since there are 10 steps, I wanted to start early here in February doing videos and walking you through each of the steps so you have plenty of time to implement them in your classroom. Luckily, the first step that we're talking about today is something that you have probably been doing all school year long with your students, and that is integrating test prep into your lessons, or doing lessons that are preparing your students to take the state tests. Every reading standard that you've already taught them is getting them ready for that. So all of your regular reading lessons have been building up and working through this first step. So a few additional tips for things that you can do now to get your students ready and to check and see if they're understanding and mastering the things that you've already taught them. So the first thing is just make sure that you have touched on all of the standards for your grade level. I like to print out a sheet that has them on, and then as I cover them throughout the year, I jot down the date that it was covered just to make sure that I didn't miss any. There are lots of different standards, and just making sure that you have at least taught each of them to your students is a great first step. Second, make sure that your students are seeing passages like the ones they're going to see on the state tests. A lot of times we use books and novels in our classroom, and it just looks different than the passages that they're going to see. So just try to pull some of those into your lessons, whether it's in your whole group lessons or when you're meeting with small groups. That's another great time to bring in some of those shorter passages or the ones that are just a few pages long rather than entire picture books or entire novels. Also, a great place to find some of those is on the ReadWorks website. I really like going over there, pulling off passages that I can use with my students. Third is to use both your whole group time and your small group time to start preparing your students. As you're reading a story, maybe you could pull out a multiple choice question about the story. Get them used to seeing questions like the ones that they're going to see on the state tests, and also get them used to writing about their reading. When they respond to their reading, have them do it in complete sentences. Make sure that they're going back into the text to find evidence. All of those things, those little things that you do every single day in your classroom, are going to add up and make sure that once you do get to state testing, your students have those skills that they need. And data is another thing that I know can be really overwhelming, and you may hate looking at data, but it can really help you as you're preparing your students. So here's my favorite way to do that. After you give an assessment, whether it's a weekly assessment on just one standard, or if it's at the end of a unit that you gave an assessment, or maybe you give benchmark assessments as well, and you get that data a few times a year. Go back through and try and drill down to individual standards and see which of your students have completely mastered those standards and which ones still need some more practice. And strategy groups are a great way to really meet with those students and go over what they need. So if you have a certain standard that a lot of your students missed, and the question was about, let's say, theme, because that's something that in third grade we had to teach multiple times before they actually understood it. If a lot of students missed questions on theme, then you can pull that into a whole group lesson. Choose a picture book that has a really clear theme, work with them to be able to determine what the characters learned that they could also apply in their own lives, and then go back and find text evidence that shows that the character learned that particular lesson. Doing it whole group makes sure that everybody is exposed to it again, since it's something that they all need to review. But as you're looking at your data, if you're seeing standards that some students got it and some students didn't, that's going to be a great thing to do in your small groups. So during your small groups, you're going to look at the data, pull students who have similar needs. So if you have students who got questions wrong about character traits, maybe you have 3 or 4 students who need to practice that standard. Pull them together in a small group, do a lesson on character traits to review, and then give them an activity to do to practice that. So that way you're reviewing it with the students who need it. The rest of your class who already has mastered character traits doesn't have to listen to it again, and they can be practicing things that they still need. Doing it that way is going to help to narrow those gaps, making sure that all of your students are able to master all of the standards. And also intervention time. If your school has intervention time where students are either pulled for different things, or you have your whole class and it's a time to differentiate and really help your students work toward their individual goals, that's a great time to do this as well. Even meeting with individual students and working on something specific that they need, anything that you can do to move them toward those goals of mastering the standards is eventually also going to help them on the state tests. So everything you're doing now is a great step in the right direction towards this one. So this is something you're going to continue doing right up until testing. We want to keep integrating it in. We don't want to do lessons that are just going to be test prep. We're going to talk about how to make it fun, first of all, because if you just keep giving your students sampler after sampler, they are going to get bored, they are going to tune out, and they are not going to care about those tests by the time they come around. So we're going to talk about more ways to integrate it into the lessons you're already doing so that your students might not even know that they're doing test prep activities. And also we're going to be talking about ways to build in fun and make it interesting for them and not just boring test prep lessons. All right, next time we are talking about step 2, which is teaching your students strategies. Once you download the test prep toolkit, you're going to find that there is a list of strategies in there that you can teach your students based on the type of passage that they're reading. We're going to be breaking those down in the next video and talking about ways to teach them to your students. I will see you then. Bye.